Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down the movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by the Chick and the Duck. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Duncan's Toy Chest, the upper-class store with the best moderately priced goods in Times Square. Find your next Christmas gift at Duncan's Toy Chest.
Or turtle doves.
Or turtle doves, that's right.
Yes.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And I am recording live on location for the first time in like a year and a half.
I mean, at least, right?
Crazy.
That's insane.
That really is. So if you've never listened to the show before, if for some reason you decided to start listening to this episode at the end of a trilogy,
That's
welcome.
weird.
Weird, but yeah, welcome. This is a podcast where we discuss films and as filmmakers, actors, writers, reluctant producer, full-time producer, and we like to figure out like what's going on in the filmmaking, what can we observe from just watching it. I try to really avoid too much digging into it. I think one of the things that we really enjoy is just seeing what you can derive from purely watching the film, as opposed to saying, Linklater said that he was trying to do X and that's why he shot this, with whatever, a helicopter, 5 miles above ground or whatever. Instead, like just watching it should communicate everything you want. I think a lot of the best art, you can see what the artist is trying to say within the art itself, instead of kind of getting a menu guide or a pamphlet on the side that tells you, here's what they actually meant. I think really well-constructed art builds in the meaning, even if it's not right there on the surface, just gold, waiting for you to grab it. If you dig a little bit, it's there and waiting for you to pull it out.
Yeah, and I think that's what he tried to do in these movies, is pull that exact stuff out of these actors. And like Linklater is really brilliant in not analogizing, whatever the word is, life. He just like, here's what it is, the raw whatever, I'm trying to tell you, and with no fluff at all. I think that's what he's most brilliant at, which is crazy because isn't that the point of movies?
Yeah.
To not, gloss over life, to like show us life in its rawest form. And I think that he just does that so beautifully.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, Linklater's a master at it. And sometimes I'll watch a film and I'll see an opportunity to do some glitzy thing, and he never goes for the glitzy thing.
Yeah. He
always goes for grounded realism, and plays it to the bone. And I mean, you got to doff your cap, to the man, because that's so much more, impactful, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll talk about it as we get into it, but I have some really interesting, like, questions for you regarding like how a movie like this is made and structured and like thought out in the beginning. So anyway.
Yeah. What are we going to cover today?
So yeah, today we're covering the third of a trilogy. Is it?
Before Midnight.
Right.
Dang it, Wes.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that we are good. Yeah.
Still recording.
We are still recording.
This is such a weird episode, not only because we're back in the same room together after so long, but also because I'm not listening to us through a headset. That is a completely different vibe. And it just feels much more like a conversation between us than I'm used to. I usually feel the orchestration of creating this thing. And right now I just feel like I'm sitting on a stage, next to you, which is,
where you belong, baby, where you belong. So we're doing Before Midnight, which is the third in this trilogy that we've done. So if you haven't seen that movie, please pause this episode and go watch it, because we're going to spoil a lot of stuff.
All the things. We'll talk about a few things. I don't have a ton of notes, but I do want to look at a couple small things about the story and writing, how the conversations have shifted, as opposed to the last two films. And there's just a few small thoughts that I had about the production itself, like stuff like having kids on set and how that changes the way you run a set, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Vacationing in Greece, we meet Jesse and Celine 9 years on together. Almost 2 decades have passed since their first meeting on that train bound for Vienna. It's directed by Richard Linklater. Screenplay by Richard Linklater, Julie Delpy, and Ethan Hawke, starring Ethan Hawke as Jesse and Julie Delpy as Celine.
Miss?
I don't want to talk right now.
You by yourself? Are you waiting for somebody?
Yeah, I'm by myself and happy to be. I'm an angry person and I hurt my kids, my work, and everyone I love.
Oh, just my type.
Okay, I'm not in the mood. I came here to be alone.
Hey, listen, I've just been checking you out from across the cafe, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but you are by far the best looking woman in this place.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'd love to buy you a drink, maybe talk to you, get to know you a little bit, you know? I mean, you're here in business? Okay, I see. All right, you have a boyfriend?
Not anymore.
Jeez, sorry to hear that. God, you want to talk about it?
I don't talk to strangers.
Well, that's the thing, I'm not a stranger. No, we've met before.
Oh.
Summer '94.
Mistaking me for someone else.
No. We even fell in love.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I vaguely remember someone sweet and romantic. Who made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. Someone who had respect for who I was.
That's me. I'm that guy.
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, see, I know something about tonight that you don't know.
Really? What is that?
Something important. You see, I know because I've actually already lived through this night.
How?
I'm a time traveler.
Okay.
No, I have a time machine up in my room, and I've come to save you just like I said I would.
Save me from what?
Save you from being blinded by all the little bullshit of life.
It's not bullshit.
I assure you, that guy you vaguely remember, the sweet romantic one that you met on a train, that is me.
That's you?
Yeah.
Guess I didn't recognize you. You look like shit.
Well, what can I say? I mean, it's tough out there in time and space. You, on the other hand, are even more beautiful than I remember.
Bullshit. Jesse, this is not a game. You get all cute, you get in my panties, and next thing I know, I'm buying peanut butter in Chicago. You're not gonna make it better by some little pickup line.
No, I'm not trying to pick you out. No, you're misunderstanding me. No. I'm only here as a messenger. I've just traveled all the way from the future. I was just with your 82-year-old self who gave me a letter to read to you. So here I am.
I'm still alive in my 80s?
Oh, yeah.
How's my French ass?
Nice.
Okay.
Really nice.
I don't care about the way I look.
We could just keep going.
I know, I could really just keep watching that. Oh, I mean, I didn't have the full film, and normally I watch these once or twice, at least twice. And so I didn't really find the perfect scene.
That's a perfect scene.
There kind of is.
It's a great scene.
It's so good. Yeah, I mean, I guess that scene just plays so well because I'm identifying hardcore with him in this movie as opposed to the first two films. I felt like I really identified with both of them at different times and most of the time. And this one, I definitely gravitated more, somewhat more towards him, even though he can get very presumptuous at times and like you can see a little bit of that aggressive attitude creeping back. But all that aside, this one, do you like this one as much as the last one? I feel like it's been a growing thing for you. Like you were so on the first one, really like the second one. How does this one stack up compared to the first two?
It's a great question. I think it's I really loved it. But I didn't like it at first. It was really slow, which was fine. I mean, you don't expect explosions or anything. But it was slow in the progression of the conversation even. Do you know what I mean? It was just it just took a while to get there. But then when it started getting into it was really when they were at dinner talking, back and forth and stuff about relationships and that one young girl saying, all relationships will end, and then you had the old lady talking about missing her husband, which was the end of that long conversation. We basically were flies on the wall at that dinner, and I remember thinking, this is amazing. Like, I just love this. I love how like real it is, and how nobody gets angry at anybody else's opinion, or everybody's just talking, and they're not afraid to talk about sex. They're not afraid to talk about desire. They're not afraid to talk about relationships, or the world in general. A worried that someone else at the table might get offended or anything. And I love that. I don't think that we really have that now. I think, and I'm including myself in that. I am personally careful about what I say around people that I don't, aren't you, right, or my wife, right? So, or my family. But as it went on, and their walk to the hotel, that whole conversation was, I mean, amazingly executed. Not just their conversation, but the tracking and the blocking and everything was just wonderful. And then the argument in the hotel was absolutely brilliant. I don't know. There had to be some kind of personal aspects to it that they wrote in here, because it was just so perfectly written. Every time she would say something, I'd say, I would say this, and he would say that. Every time he'd say something stupid, I'd say, if I was her, I would say this, and she would say that. And they did a really amazing job of balancing both, where you can either pick a side or not. You can just either watch as a fly on the wall and enjoy the banter, or you could be on his side, or you could be on her side.
And that whole fight spirals so perfectly slowly. It doesn't begin with a bang.
Right.
It begins with a whimper.
And it's like this whole, it was a slow lift, and then it would hit a peak and would come down, and then it would hit a peak and come down. And it like, she left and she came back, and they almost made up. He poured some wine, and then, then she left again, and she came back and said she didn't love, and then she really left. And then I loved that they just sat there with him for a minute, because, I mean, if you've been with a woman for a decade and then she comes in and says, I don't love you anymore, I think that a lot of people, and I mean, I think anybody, depending on the circumstance, might think that's it, right? That's it. It's over. She doesn't love me anymore. Well, that's the only reason I'm here, right? Because we love each other. But he didn't accept that. And I love that he didn't accept that. It was like, no, I'm not having that. You're angry. That's why you said that. You're trying to hurt me. I've hurt you. Let's figure something out. I mean, yeah, anyway, I think that this was, I loved it. I loved it as the end of the trilogy. Because where were they going to go? They've been, they were overly nice to each other at the beginning. They attacked each other a little bit in the middle. And then after you've been with someone for 10 plus years, you know a lot about them. They know a lot about you. You know how to push their buttons. They know how to push yours. You lose communication at times, and sometimes it can get hairy, and you got to be okay with that, because it's not always going to be roses. And I think it was important for them to call that out. If they were just like the same way, it would have been a terrible movie. If they were the same way as the second one, or first one, or the second one, it would just been terrible.
No, I completely agree, because the first two films, they explore the ideas about long-term love and long-term relationships. And there's all these moments where she's talking about, I think I could only truly love someone if I knew, the stupid story they were going to tell next, because I've heard it for the 1,000th time, but they're talking to someone new and it's new to them. And I think it's only in those moments. And so getting to test those kinds of ideas, even though I don't think he actually tests that specific idea, but it's that idea of, you think you can only love someone if you've been with them for a long time. Well, let's see what happens after you've been with someone for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And to the fight, I mean, it starts, I love that it begins with them in the middle about to have sex. Like, this is about to be a great night. And then the phone rings, she answers it. It's his son. And now he's frustrated. She didn't let him talk to his son. And then he's also frustrated that, she gave him this note as he's getting off, good luck with your mom. What does that mean? Why would you tell him that? that becomes a light fight that just kind of starts eating away at their perfect evening.
Yeah.
And before you know it, he's back to accusing her of hooking up or like
Yeah.
going down on some dude. And
Yeah.
he seems to have this fascination of like accusing her of infidelity, which if you start to extrapolate, after the fact, is his own guilty conscience.
Yeah.
Because he clearly slept with someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's looking to get away with it by having her admit to doing the same thing. And now suddenly, we're even, right? And I don't know. I can see a lot of relationships working that way. I don't think all relationships do. I don't operate that way.
No.
And so, but it's fun because it feels in keeping with his character.
Mhm.
That's the same guy, that we've been watching for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
This is the evolution of that.
Yeah.
And now he's become semi-famous, right? He's a well-known author. He shows up to a random hotel and he's autographing a book. And so he's got some level of notoriety. And I don't remember what movie it was, or maybe it was just someone talking. But I remember what it was. But someone was like giving another character grief about like infidelity. And this other guy is really famous, really rich. He's like, it's easy to say it when no one wants you. That's a very simple place to be at right now.
Exactly.
And I'm sure it probably does change when suddenly, there's far more opportunity and you now have to turn it away, as opposed to like begging, someone to go out with you. And so I appreciate them kind of exploring those ideas in very crafted ways. It's not slap you in the face. It's no, he's got a guilty conscience. And now instead of saying like, hey, I did something wrong a while back, no, I'm just going to do what most people do, which is stop trusting other people because they no longer trust themselves.
Oh, yes. That's it.
Right?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
That's deep. That's a really deep crafted character.
Totally.
Freaking genius.
It's really great. Like there are so many moments that they write in that a normal script wouldn't write in.
Mm-hmm.
These little things, and they're hard to call out unless you're watching it.
Yeah.
And then you see them all over the place. Particularly in the fights that they have, or I guess they're multiple because the fight kind of evolves in the hotel room, but particularly then, because all the rest of it is just kind of like just regular conversation, right? That any two people could have. I did feel at times that there were some lines that felt a little like okay, they've been together for 10 years. This is not this is a conversation that I can't believe that they hadn't had before, right?
Yeah.
But those things happen too. Because just because you're with somebody for 10 years doesn't mean you've talked about everything. And I mean, especially those two, because they just talk constantly.
But even in the car ride on the way from the airport, like they're talking about how we haven't been having, or the walk, maybe it's on the walk from on the way to the hotel, where they're like, we haven't really had any conversations. Like, when was the last time we just hung out and we're bullshitting? Yeah.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah. And you're sitting there thinking, well, for me, it was 9 years ago. It's been 9 years for me. So now you should talk. But then when they actually argue, they make excellent points. I mean, I found myself, and I don't know if it's because I'm a man, I don't know, but I found myself on his side a lot more.
Yeah.
But also the idea, like so I don't know. I'm a little bit biased because I mean, I moved across the country with my wife. That why she would
just with
for well, but yeah. But the point is that like it wasn't just a no at first, and I felt like it was just such a hard no at the beginning
from her
at first. But then I realized, oh, they've had this conversation before. This is something that they've talked about a lot, and she brought it up a couple of times in their conversation that she doesn't want to talk about it anymore because she's not going.
Yeah. And she lived in New York for a couple years,
right?
With him.
Exactly. So she's been there and done that. So it's they develop it so well,
Yeah.
that whole scenario. so that whenever you feel like I'm on his side, she'll say something that will remind you of a conversation they had earlier in the movie. That's like, oh yeah, that's another nail right there. Like, of course, why would she go?
Yeah.
Um, uh, and then, but the real thing, and they just keep like adding little bits, specifically when when she says in the fight, um, that she doesn't want to go because his ex-wife only gives him every other weekend, and so that's like 30 days a year. She said, "Why would I go there so that you can have 30 extra days with him? Like that's not going to matter.
Yeah.
It's not going to make a difference." And she's probably right. That's like,
That's the pure logical, unemotional part of the conversation that he wants to have.
right, exactly. But she hadn't, we didn't really, hadn't been reminded of that until that moment. So that whole time I was like, dude, why are you fighting about this so hard? Why don't you just maybe entertain it? And then she says that, and it's like, actually, to move your entire life across the world, um, for 30 extra days a year, that might not be, and you have daughters too.
Yeah.
So you're taking your daughters away from what the only thing they've known. So, yeah, it would be very difficult.
I also find it interesting. Did you get a feel for why I mean, his ex, right? His son's mother, is kind of made out to be this really terrible person. And all we know is they're accusing her of like being an alcoholic, which we don't even know of how much truth is in that, right? It's all perspective, because how many times have you known people that end up divorced, and suddenly you hear all these really terrible negative things that were never present, while you knew them together. Yeah, and so I just find it interesting that we're really only getting one side of the story, which is as it goes with Friends and this kind of movie. But yeah, did you ever get a sense of, beyond some of that simple stuff, whether it really was a negative situation for the kid?
Not really, other than when she said that she called her a drunk, like you said, and like all these other terrible things. But I mean that, and then her not giving him more custody, kind of makes it feel like that. But I don't,
Because I can't imagine a mom being like, yeah, you know what? Take my son to another country.
right, exactly. No, of
What?
course
No.
she's not going to say that's okay. But she's going to give you a summer,
Yeah.
yeah.
And she did, right?
And she did. And also he,
You can imagine him being a bit of
I mean,
a wad.
he left her. He went overseas on a book tour, met up with this girl after 10 years or 9 years, and then left her
I could see being bitter about that.
a little bit. And they have had a kid together. So I don't particularly blame her for hating him. I would too.
Yeah.
So I mean, to take that away from her son is a little aggressive, but she's giving him what she thinks is fair. It's their own situation.
Yeah, I think this is one of the ways that I was really impressed with this movie, is how much the conversation shifted as compared to the first two films. The first two were so much more philosophical and meandering, and this was so much more rooted in day-to-day realities.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the first opening scene didn't even have her.
Yeah.
It was just establishing the son, so that as that conversation spiraled out later on, you could feel and understand the weight of it. It's not just this abstract idea that he has a son. Instead, we've met the kid. He's a cool kid, and he's a kid with his own ideas about reality. And you can almost feel the irony with some of the conversations in the first film, when Jesse's discussing his home life and parents and how his dad sucks. And, parents just want you to be a reflection of themselves, kind of stuff. And now here he is trying to push him into soccer. And the kid's sitting there telling him, I don't care about it.
Yeah.
And it's not good enough. And he's like, well, you don't got to decide right now. And he's becoming very much the person that, he didn't think he would become. And so that kind of idea keeps taking place over and over again, even in the car ride. Some of the first conversations are about work and how this wind turbine project failed at the last mile. And then we see like him discussing and insisting that she not take this other job. Like, part of me is like, well, is this your place? Like, should you be telling her what job to not take? And then as that conversation even unfolded more, you got the sense that he's fighting for her because maybe through past conversations, he knows that she doesn't really want to do this thing. And she's over here being practical. Well, it pays more money and blah, blah, blah. Better career opportunities or whatever she says. And he's like, well, look, man, do whatever you want. I just make sure that's what you want to do. And so the presentation as a fly on the wall feels very complicated because you get a sense of history, even though that history isn't perfectly exposited, you know, in the process. And it's that level of complexity that I really appreciated, as well as you start to get a more and more sense of the consequences of them being together at all, right? The son, the ex, his life in France or wherever they're currently located. Even though they're in Greece, that's like a summer vacation thing.
Yeah.
But you also maybe get the consequences of potentially her having not been there 6 months after that original meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Life completely shifts, and all these things that are problems for their lives now would not have been problems in the first place. There would be no son, there would be no ex, and maybe he could live guilt-free in France with whatever their family would have looked like at that point. And so you start to kind of, if you piece together, like this is a puzzle piece. It's not just, you know, a 4-piece puzzle. It's the 1,000-piece puzzle that you really have to construct yourself.
Yeah.
That to me is just all the extra layers that makes this such a, I don't know, fun movie.
It's great. Yeah.
The other thing that I really like is that they present a bigger view of their life together, right? It's no longer about them coming together or discussing what could have been or should have been. Instead, we actually get to see what their life is like, how they view each other, all those mundane things like work and raising kids, being bad parents. In that way, I thought this was so much funnier than the first two films. Like I was cracking up left and right because it's more personal. There's a depth of conversation that's now spiked with familiarity, the humor of knowing someone, the buttons to push, and sometimes the buttons that push that I'm cringing at. I'm like, I can't believe you just did that. Like he grabs her boob at a certain point, and it's so crude. And I'm like, and he's laughing and she's kind of laughing about it. Like there's that level of comfort that they have with each other that is different. Even their past, they revisit their past and they kind of revise it in ways that now have humor and that we don't even remember. Like they talk about the pinball and she's like, you got to let them win at all this stuff, like, or else, you know. And she's talked about letting them win at pinball, and that wasn't even a conversation in the first film.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't moments that we didn't see that happened along the way.
Can I call out the perfect scenario in the car of them driving past the ruins, saying that the kids are going to be upset. No, we'll just do it, and then him eating the apple. I cannot tell you how perfect and accurate that is. That is exact. I am that dad. They're like, hey, did she eat that apple? No, she didn't. She's asleep. Here, hook me up. Hook me up with that apple. But and then, Daddy, where's my apple? It's perfect. And then you feel like, oh my God, I just ate my daughter's apple, so and good. now she's hungry.
Is there any guilt over that?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yes, absolutely.
I was just cracking up because she pulls out this browned apple that looks, 2-day old. Dude. And he's like, oh no, there's still some good parts over here.
Bro, I'm telling you, when you become a dad, you just get what you can get.
Get it.
Okay? Like a half browned apple, you're all right. There's a couple of bites with skin on it still. It's some good meat under there.
That's the high life.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like I also love the dark sense of humor that they have. There's that story that she's telling. It's a horrible story about I think it was her dad that had to kill kittens because they were just having too many. And she didn't know until much older when he lets it slip. Like, I forgot that I had to keep that lie up. And they're laughing about it. And that made me so happy, actually. Not because it's a funny story, but because that's my kind of humor. Like you take something that actually is dark and you find kind of the irony or you deal with it through humor. And that's my family. We would deal with dark stuff through morbid humor, gallows humor, as they say.
I also like that they didn't linger on anything.
Mm.
So yeah, she mentions that about her dad, and he's like, oh, basically, oh, that's crazy, and blah 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 blah, and then he just goes on, or he'll tell her something, and she'll just come back with something about herself.
Yeah.
It just, I think that in a normal conversation, you might pry a little bit more, but in a film like this, you want to keep it progressing. You want
Yeah.
to keep it changing. The dialogue has to change pretty aggressively in order, because that's all there is.
Yeah.
It's dialogue.
Yeah.
So you got to you got to have punches, but with words instead, not like aggressive, violent punches until the actual fight, but still. And they just do that so masterfully. It's
Yeah, it's seamless. They go from that to talking like about how their daughters are going to end up in rehab because they're such terrible
yeah.
parents.
Oh yeah.
And it's all like nudge, like
Uh-huh.
the kind of stuff that I'm sure most parents have. Like that would definitely be most of my conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
How you're ruining
But they
your
just
kids.
like joke about it, because I think that they understand that they've been ruined by theirs.
Yeah. I thought the nudity was interesting in this. It takes a turn. For one, it starts off very sexy, right? It's literally they're getting into having sex, and then the fight breaks out, and it now becomes mundane. Like what started as like titillation became like, I don't know, nothingness. Like, it was just like, these are old school married people who just fight. Like, you just deal with it. And it wasn't like she was moving to cover herself up or anything. It was just like, no, we're gonna have it out right now. It just added to this realism that Linklater goes after, and to me, it's a really cool use of nudity. Yeah, so nudity is great.
I know.
Big edit right there. We just ran into some technical difficulties, but also, like, as that fight began spiraling, they get isolated for a while into their own frames and even their own rooms. Like, they're in separate rooms, and so we spend most of this film trying to get them into the same frame, whether it's a 2-shot or dirty singles or what have you. Now we can feel the tension of the fight kind of
That's a great point.
visually showing up.
Yeah.
And that was kind of nice. And then it spirals into, the age-old question that probably most married couples with kids have, which is, if it weren't for the kids, will we still be together? Which is a tough one. And I can, yeah. After that, though, she storms out and he flops into the couch after she exits. And when she re-enters, I love that, he's still on the couch, and we cut to this alternate angle of the couch, kind of a wide, where he's taking up the whole frame. But in the foreground, like, we have this bottle of wine unopened and these 2 empty glasses. And I feel like that's somewhat of a visual metaphor that they're playing with, kind of wine and red symbolizing their love. And in the middle of this fight, that's probably what it feels like. It probably feels like there is no love there. And then, like you said earlier, they start to patch things up. That's when he's opening up the wine. Like, hey, let's actually reconnect and remember, right? And he pours the wine, and it gets into this little bit of, is this half full or half empty? And he starts drinking,
because he poured big glasses.
Big
He
glasses.
just kept going. I'm like, all right, bro.
And she never drinks. He drinks, but she doesn't. And that's right about the time when she's coming to, what seems like a realization to her, which is, I don't love you anymore. And I love that. There's a lot of symbolism that you can play with that. But this is the first time in all 3 films that I feel like we actually have stakes. There's real stakes right now about where their love is at. Can it be salvaged? And it leads into that final sequence on the pier at the restaurant, of him trying to reconnect with her and remind her of the things that are important. And I bet there's probably times in their life, this is just one of their moments, but I bet there's been other moments where she's had to do that with him, where he's probably on his last leg and he's like, you know what, screw all this. Because he seems, she's a bit of the firebrand for the past 2 films. But he's definitely got that in him too.
Oh yeah.
He's pretty aggressive, and yeah, I don't know. I just think that's a really beautiful moment that we kind of get to see evolve of how do we fix this thing that from the beginning felt like this improbable, foolish, sentimentalist love, right? You met
Mhm.
someone and you're caught up in the whirlwind romance of it instead of asking, do I love this person for who they are, or do I love this person for the idea that they represent that I've romanticized? Um,
Yeah.
and they explore it.
You know, for the way that I've seen their characters progress over the last 3 films has been amazing because they've crossed paths. He was the most aggressive at the beginning, and she
Mm,
was just, you know, not timid, but
yeah.
just going along for the ride.
Hmm.
And then, they flipped it in the second one. Um, and now I feel like they've continued to go in that direction. I mean, yes, he's aggressive, in a way, but he's aggressive in that he wants her and is not going to let anything get in the way of that, right? And he's going to fight for her and stick and try to stay with her as much as he possibly can. Um but he's the least aggressive because he's the least aggressive in every other way, right? Because I feel like she's aggressive outside of outside of their relationship. She's the one going for her, like, job wise, she's fighting for this new job, or she wants this new job, or like she's fighting against going, to the US. She's fighting the mother, Hank's mom.
Hmm.
She hates her, and she's like openly says she's a drunken bitch and blah blah blah. Blah. And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, let's not talk about her. I just want to, I want to be there for Hank, but I know that it's delicate conversation with you." And he's more laid back outside of their relationship, and
Right.
she's more aggressive outside of the relationship. So, in that way, I just see their characters switching. But the whole thing this whole movie for me comes down to that one line that he says that you played. And I don't know it exactly, but it was I'm from the future, and I've come back to tell you to not let all the little bullshit ruin this, essentially.
Yeah.
And that is the definition of being married forever. Is that because there is bullshit all over the place. All over the place. It is never easy to be with someone for a long time. I don't care how much you love them. You see these 94-year-old people that have been married for 70 years, like his, uh,
The woman.
grandparents
Yeah.
were, and and that there, I guarantee you, there were times where they didn't want to be with each other, where they hated each other. They even thought maybe they didn't love each other anymore. That happens to everyone. I don't care who you are. The people, the guys from the the Notebook, right? I guarantee you there were times where they felt that way, but it's not about feeling that way and letting it beat you. It's about knowing who that other person is and knowing that, like she said, I don't think I love you anymore. It doesn't he the shot of the glasses. So he's sitting there by himself. She
Hmm.
says, "I don't love you anymore." And he sits down at the table and he looks at the two glasses, the two full glasses. To me, that's a metaphor for this hadn't even started.
Wow.
We didn't even get to drink, like, not just the scenario,
Right,
but our
right.
lives are these glasses. They are only halfway done. So do you want to just throw this away, or are you going to drink? And so that was, and then I think the next shot we see is her at the table
Hmm.
outside and him walking up to her, right? That whole long shot.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just so brilliantly put together in that regard because it's all about that. It's all about the little things, and you either can embrace them or you can let them kill you. And so many people let them kill them. And I'm not saying that they're not important. Just like he said, you know, he said they're not important. She said they are.
Yeah.
They are important, but they're also not. And you got to know when to weigh them the correct amount. It's I'm not saying that I know how,
Yeah, you are.
I deal with them on a daily basis. So does my wife. I'm not a perfect person, but I tend to think that hopefully at the end of whatever, at the end of the decade or the end of the year or the end of this week, that they've made us stronger rather than beating us down, right? And they will beat you down, but they also will make you stronger. And they do that in such a subtle way where if you're not paying attention or you're not even paying attention, you could be paying attention and still not see it because you're not in that space in your life, right? So different people could watch this movie in a totally different way. Like I said, you could be on his side or on her side.
Yeah.
Not even depending on whether you're male or female, but where you are in your life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously watching it from a different point because, you know, I'm not married. I don't have a 10-year relationship.
Of course.
And so whenever I'm pretty dispassionately watching with no stake in the game, I'm just like, yeah, she's being unreasonable right now. Or, oh, yeah, dude, stop pushing that button. Whereas if I have all that history and that experience, I'm like, yep, push that button.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there were times where I was like, dude, do not let her go. Do not pull that shit back. You know, like that is, and I could see in those moments sometimes if someone who might not have been married for 10 years might be like, bro, just back up. Like, no. You pick your battles and this is a good one. You know? Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Production wise, I guess one of the top things that jumped out at me was there was a lot more production value in this one than I feel like in the past ones. The others, and I think that speaks less to like what they were trying to accomplish with a little bit of budget, as opposed to what they were trying to accomplish within the means of the story itself. And the first two, you know, they're just kind of ragtag. They're walking around exploring this city and that city. And so the production felt a little bit more skint. This one, they're established in their lives. They're established in their relationship. And in that way, I think the production value reflects that this isn't somewhere that they're just camping out. This isn't like a fly-by-night walk and talk. This is a part of their reality, part of their life. And so the production felt bigger, maybe more background extras, a lot more setups, a lot more lighting. I could feel the lighting a little bit more, especially like in the hotel room or even on the pier. It felt like they put a lot more time, a lot more camera angles and setups and a lot more dolly moves. And you could feel that. And I think that was very much a reflection of the Jesse and Celine, not just, oh, Linklater is able to get a bigger budget because Boyhood did or whatever. I think this is before Boyhood, but it wasn't that, right? It was much more, I think this calls for that so that we don't just feel like backpackers in a city. Instead, we feel like we're in someone's lives. And visually, that was very well reflected. And with that, I mean, I think one of the things that just strikes me is whenever you see kids in a movie, more so the twins, but probably even the other son, the teenage son, Hank, like that changes the way you do everything. Having a kid on set. Luckily, I haven't really run into this much, if at all. But there's only so many hours you can have a kid on set. So that means whether you're rehearsing or shooting, I forget what the number of hours. I think it's like 5 or 6 hours. And that's it. Like they're pretty hard about that. Now maybe they were shooting internationally, so maybe in Greece those rules relax a bit. But I think Linklater's still like a DGA member, and so I would assume there's certain union rules that he's still adhering to, or maybe not. I don't know. But assuming that it is the case, that means now you're building the scene and you're spending way more time rehearsing with just Julie and Ethan. That way, whenever it's go time, okay, kids their call time is now 30 minutes before they're filming, and like we can get a few scenes in with them, but that way we can start rolling takes. And if they screw up the first take, that's fine. We can just treat that as a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Burn takes. And that way, because the other thing that happens too is the magical first 1 or 2 takes are great with kids before they start getting restless and antsy. You just don't want to count on any of that. But at some point, you can definitely count on kids just falling apart.
Oh yeah, that
you just don't know when, right?
Yeah, exactly. How much time do you have until that happens?
The clock is ticking. And honestly, I treat any non-actor that way. Kids definitely, but even non-actors, I build my day around, oh, we're having to, like my last project, we had what the client called a key opinion leader, an expert in their field on a very niche medical thing. And I worked with my producer because the client was like, let's do X. And I was like, nope, here's what we're going to do. We're going to shoot. This is a 2-day shoot. She's going to be on the day 2. Therefore, I want to shoot everything else on day 1. And that way it's going to lead into this scene that we need to capture with her. We're going to get her at the beginning of day 1, and we're going to structure it like this, this, and this, because she's not an actor. I want to make sure we get the hardest part first. And if she's still got some juice in her, then we'll go and get these like extra nice to haves. Get your nice to haves at the end, get your must haves at the beginning. And that way you don't shoot yourself in the foot, because once, non-actors flame out, that's it.
Yeah.
They're not coming back, you know. Once they're out of gas, they're out of gas. And so you build around that. And I think you do this. I do the same thing with kids. Like, let's make sure they're fresh, they're excited. And if we get 2 good hours out of them, then great. But we're going to make sure we get those 2 hours the best that you possibly can. The other thing that jumped out was I don't remember the other 2 films having a score. Everything else, from what I remember, it was all mise en scene, right? Stuff that was actually coming from the sets. This is the first time I remember hearing an actual score over the film. And it's beautiful. It's simple. It sets the feel. You feel like you're in Greece, even though it's not necessarily Greece film, Greece scoring. It's orchestrated, and it's flowing, and it's simple, and it's beautiful, and it's not gaudy, right?
Yeah.
And that much I really liked. Going back to the table scene, I only really had one other note cinematography wise, which was that I completely agree. Like when they get to that big family style dinner at the vacation house with the gentleman that they were staying with, that whole conversation, all of that, I could have spent the entire hour 40 there and been completely content.
Yeah.
Which probably also means they made it exactly right. They left you wanting more.
Exactly. Right. Because I did feel like at one point I'm like, man, we've been here for a long time. I feel like, I mean, I wasn't upset about it, but at the same time I thought, well, are we gonna go somewhere else? And yeah,
I was glancing. I want to say that was about a 15-minute scene.
Yeah.
It felt like a 30, but
yeah,
it's just so good. But one of the things that happens at the end of that sequence that you mentioned was the older woman describing missing her husband. And I love that we start that little moment by watching Jesse and Celine. They're in this 2-shot, this kind of medium wide 2-shot, as they're listening to the beginning of her describing, like, feeling like her husband was still around for a while, and imagining what he would say to her wearing this or this thing that would happen. We just kind of sit there and watch Jesse and Celine together as they're listening to this. And then we reverse out of that into watching her tell the story, but she's framed in between Jesse and Celine. And so even though we're listening to her story, we're still imagining how they're hearing this story and how it relates to their own love. And that there's visual context to her story, as she's framed right there in the middle of them. And I love it. I think that's such a simple, beautiful way to experience something through someone else's eyes. And adding this context makes us hear one thing, but consume it in a different, completely other way. Because we're hearing her, we're thinking about them.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. I think the natural way is for us to hear that and just think about how it applies to our own lives. But through the framing, they add in all these other layers. It's not about that. We're doing that too, to some degree. You can't hear someone tell a story without adding yourself to their story. But also it's a really cool mixing that they're doing just through the visual framework that they're creating there. Yeah, I only had one question for you. but I think it's a really good one.
Okay.
And so this is kind of ejecting out of the heart of the story, and asking something that's there, which is Jesse wrote Celine into his work. Their experience became kind of the foundation for his career. What happens in that summer of '94 launches his writing career. And so my question to you is, and she gets mad later, at the end of the film, she's like, "Don't effing write me anymore into your books, which are terrible. You think you're whatever, Arthur Miller or whatever," she says. Henry Miller. I don't know who Henry Miller is. I know who Arthur Miller is, but she's like, "You're not in any way, shape, or form."
Oh yeah, right.
It's like, damn, that's pretty hardcore, and that's going for the jugular.
Yeah.
Like, I think if someone I loved starts, saying, "You're not David Fincher in any shape or form," where's my lawyer? It's time to split. No, but so my question to you is it okay to use people in your life for writing material? How do you feel about that?
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No limits?
No limits.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
that.
That's that.
You don't feel any
No.
internal wrestling with
No.
You're
No.
so hard
Absolutely
set
not.
on this. Where is that coming from?
How the fuck else are you going to create anything? What are you going to water everything down? Like you're the I think you think the same way. I hope you think the same way. Like if I have an experience, I mean, because we're talking about this movie, like with my wife, and I'm inspired to create something because of it, I'm not going to not create that. I've done that. I've not created things, or I've created something but not let anybody hear it because of that exact scenario, and it kills you. It kills your creativity. It kills the reason why you're doing the thing in the first place, because you had something, and then because of someone else, you're not putting it out, or you're not finishing it, or you're not creating it in the first place. And that's a tragedy. It's a bigger tragedy than if you were to create it and hurt somebody's feelings. And honestly, I'm sure that there are probably things where, it's probably it's probably going to hurt somebody. My wife's been working on a memoir. That is not easy thing to do with, putting the people in it that she needs to put in it. But if you're around the right people that actually believe in you and actually know that you're coming from a good place. I mean, if you're going to go out and like just tear somebody apart and then expect them to not be hurt, that's on you as a creator, right? You should do it. Maybe, there are ways to do it, right? You talk to the person, you say, "Listen, I don't feel this way now, but at the time I felt like this, and I had to put it in a song, or I had to put it in a film or whatever to deal with it. But we're good. I just want you to know that before you listen to this or before you watch this." There's ways to do it, but you can't just ignore. If you're a creator, you can't just ignore the muse. If it comes, do something, and then deal with the aftermath after it. It's not like it's going to kill the other person, right? It might hurt their feelings. It might hurt your relationship. It might end your relationship. But then in that case, was it really that strong to begin with? My wife has, she's a writer. She's written things that hurt. I would never in a million years ask her not to. I hope she does. Because that's how she feels. I'm a writer. I know I've written things that have hurt her. But what else are you going to do? She doesn't want me to change. She doesn't want me to not write those things if I feel that way. And I think that's good. I think it's hard, but necessary. How do you feel?
I mean, I'm much more squishy. I agree that it's okay, but personally, I have a very difficult time actually doing it. This is why I think I tend to write so many other different things that aren't related at all to my life. I had such a difficult upbringing. Like, there's so many different points in my life that were just brutal. And I just feel terrible like writing about it, because now it's almost judgment on the people in your life. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to speak my truth. And this is the thing I've even in the last, I don't know, couple years, I'm really wrestling with is being able to speak my truth without fear of what it might do to someone else. Because I think you're right. What else are you going to do? Like, what else is there to some degree? What else is there to create from outside of your own life experience? Right.
Yeah.
And that's legit. That's valid. I have a really hard time, like, I don't think exposing people is the right word for it, but just uh, having that out there. Because it's one thing for me to put my flaws and picadillos out on display. It feels so much harder to do that on other people, and so I wrestle with it. I agree. I think everything you're saying is absolutely right.
Yes.
Absolutely right. I wrestle with it so hard that it's pretty rare for me to actually do it. Like I've only done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And one of them was Threads, and another short film I did. But for the most part, I just veer into more philosophical territory, and that's not. But there's a lot of rich material, for lack of a better way to phrase it, like in my life that I could easily, and people listening. I've had this conversation with a number of people. Most people think their life would make a really good story. It wouldn't. I'm just gonna burst that bubble. Like, your life story is not a good story. Bar very few people. Now, what is a really good story is a moment from your life.
Great call. Wow.
That's where you can really, like, that funeral that you went to and the uncle, showed up drunk and, smashed a bottle on the casket or whatever. That could end up being a really great moment that could be elaborated into a film. But for the most part, your entire life story is boring as shit. Don't write that.
Yeah.
But find those little moments in your life. And then the rest of your life is context.
Dude, that's such a great.
People miss that all the time. And I would say 80% of the time I just keep my mouth closed. But every once in a while, if I'm talking to the right person, I'm like, no, your life is boring, bro. Like, you have no idea.
You're not special.
You're not special at all.
You're not special.
I'm not either. My life would make a boring story as a whole. But, in these little moments, these slices, you can tell really compelling, interesting stories for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I don't know. I think I struggle, like, pulling people that I know and moments that I know into my stories. And I usually just don't use any part of it. Like, I have the whole pig just sitting there dying, and it sucks.
You should do something with that. I think we've had this conversation.
I think we probably
before,
have.
And I mean, if nothing else, it's cathartic. If nothing else, but everybody has to make that decision, because it's not, just because my opinion is write it doesn't mean that is a good thing 100% of the time. Everybody has different situations, different scenarios and everything. I just know that for me, I mean, there are so many. Think about if someone were to write something that, like, really pissed off their entire family, right? And then their entire family won't speak to them anymore, but 1 million people heard it and 1 million people loved it, and it changed their lives. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Like, that's what I mean. It's like the concern there, at least for me, is that what if I do this? I hurt all these people I love, and nobody gives a shit about it.
That's the nightmare.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? But then at the end of the day, still, I've made something out of it that was important, that helped me. And is it worth it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a good point, because, I mean, for me, growing up, most of my catharsis came from writing. Even if I didn't do anything with it, the act of creating can alleviate all kinds of things.
Yeah. And it's a little bit more for you because you got to make it into visual.
Yeah.
Which means a lot of things have to happen. So you really got to commit to it. So it'd be harder than, like, writing in a journal and then just throwing it away.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm going to make this thing. So I get the concern. I totally get the concern. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Great question.
Last thoughts?
I think the only other thing that I want to say about why this movie is so great is the way and then that's it, is the way that they establish them as together and happy.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like they're not like fighting from the very beginning.
None,
They have
right?
a little bit of scuffle or whatever, but that's a daily conversation, right?
Right.
Um,
She gets up in arms a little bit on, if I was that girl on the train right now, would you ask me to get off with you?
yeah, but I mean, even from the beginning of them in the car,
Uh,
like they argue a little bit about like him talking about going to moving back to the States at one point,
right.
or her getting this new job or something,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just like,
Right.
just go do it, and uh, or don't do it because you wouldn't love it, but do whatever you want. But so they have a few little scuffles, but they obviously love each other and they're obviously happy, right? And they establish that pretty well, that they're comfortable, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And then so that when they start fighting, you're like, oh my God, I don't want this to happen. I've been with these people. They're obviously, still in love. They obviously want to be with each other, but now it's really spiraling out of control. That anyway, it's a great setup for what occurs towards the end.
Yeah, and I guess looking at all three as a whole, like once again, I came into Before Midnight a little trepidatious, right?
Mhm.
Like, well, what are they going to do with Jesse and Celine?
Yeah.
Like, don't mess us up. And to still find ways to innovate and to meet other people. Like, this is the first time we really spend time, real time, with anyone that isn't them.
Yeah.
Like, they have encounters, but they're brief. And they're set dressing. They're not characters.
Yeah.
And here we're really meeting other people. We're giving them space
Yeah.
to espouse their own ideas and their own life experiences. And we just, for the first time, see Jesse and Celine both just quiet and listening to someone else. And that
Great
was
point.
really cool, just to see a little bit more of their life instead of just imagining and playing around. Because we all experience our vacation selves versus our at-home selves.
Yeah.
And up until this point, we really only got to see their vacation selves.
Yeah.
And this is everyday stuff.
Yeah. It was great.
I loved it.
Me too.
Nice. What are you going to recommend this week?
Uh, what are you going to recommend?
So there's a film that came out in 2006 that I really enjoyed. That if you enjoy this style of film, the walk and talk and just conversational, then I think you would like Bella. That's this very similar. I think it's set in New York, and it's two people who meet and get to know each other over the course of a day. There's something important happening in both their lives, and they both do something important for each other in this span of a day. And so it's beautiful, really well done. I haven't watched it since it came out, so maybe it's terrible now. So don't hold me to that.
Gotcha.
But I keep meaning to go back to it, and I just remember really loving it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to recommend King Richard, which we watched the other night and really, really enjoyed. It's streaming on HBO, but it's also in the theaters. So if you have a chance, definitely go see it. Yeah, Will Smith is just on his top of his game. The writing is really good. It's kind of long, but doesn't feel long.
They could have made that 3 hours, and that
Yeah,
would have been good.
Exactly. So King Richard. Yeah.
Nice. Stay tuned for next week. We are going to be dipping our toe in this little film that some people may not have seen or heard of. It's called The Matrix. We're taking the red pill.
Yeah.
And in the good way. I know that term's been abused for the last 20,000 years, however long this thing's been out. But yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll take a peek and see if we discover anything new in the Matrix. I doubt it, but we'll give it the Wes and Todd go.
Yeah. Give it the old college try.
And if you're enjoying this show, this episode, this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, review us on iTunes, and leave us a note if there's something you want us to talk about. We did this because of one of our listeners and co-hosts requested that we do the Before trilogy. So thanks to Todd. I hope you've dropped a review. If you haven't, you should. Eat your own dog food, Todd.
I don't know, Margot.
And if you want to drop a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/before-midnight.
And we'll leave you with a quote of the day from Friedrich Nietzsche. It is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages. Do you believe that?
I mean, I guess I have really, no frame of reference for this, but that would be my belief. Yeah, I think that's what's kept me out of a lot of relationships. Is there might be a really nice romantic connection, but I know to sustain something long term, I need intellectual stimulation and the same level of humor, and there's a whole other level of connection that's necessary. And this quote was found by your wife. As I was hunting, I needed help, so I called in the best.
Sure. And she gave you Nietzsche?
She gave me
Interesting.
Nietzsche, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, talk to her about that. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
Do you-
I
what do you
I
think?
haven't thought about it, but
Mm.
reading it, at first I was like, huh. But that makes sense because, you can love a lot of people, or you can love, in that specific way, one person, but if you don't have like respect for them, um, or like at this level of platonicness that is like, I got your back,
Mhm.
as opposed to I got your back if you love me too. Like I got your back regardless, then there's this it's a little bit different. It's like no, I'm going to spend a lot of time with you, so I got to like you. I'm going to love you,
Yeah.
but I'm not always going to like you, for the most part, like there's going to be times where I'm like, I don't want to be around you. You don't want to be around me. Um, but as long as, you try to see where the other person is coming from, and it's okay to let them go away for a little while, or for you to go away for a little while, and just trust that, like, I'll be back, and then go back. Yeah, that feels like a little bit more of like a friendship. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
haven't seen you in a long time,
Yeah.
but then I see you, and it's like I saw you yesterday,
Yes.
and that's the thing, But there, and I guess when you're married, there's more of a longing
Mhm.
to, like, I gotta get back to that person.
Yeah.
But as long as you have that level of respect and in a way admiration for the other person, then it just tends to, like, be more okay, right?
Yeah, and relationships are just interesting in that way because when you're single or you're apart for a while, like there's a new normal, and it's like I can't remember being with this other person anymore, and it's like we were never together. But then whenever you do come back together, or you do get in a relationship, it's suddenly like I cannot remember what it was like to be single. I can't remember life before you. And I don't want to, right? It's an interesting, I don't know, dynamic that kind of unfurls.
Yeah, it's funny because Jenny and I were talking the other day about, like, how many lives do you live? I think we were talking about it too. And I the moment I met her was a division of before and then after, and I mean, yeah, it is. I don't know. I agree with that quote. I think that quote is cool. Like, the more we talk about it, the more I want to talk about it, but that's not what this podcast is.
That's true. Our relationship podcast is coming next month. Wes and Todd tell you how to break up amicably.
Love and friendship. Love. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this trilogy. Hope you guys did too. Make sure to share us with your friends, review us, and tell us what you want us to cover. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.